Security is not the absence of threats. It is the presence of resilience. Welcome to the ASIS CPP Mastery Series 2026. If you are preparing for the Certified Protection Professional examination, this series is designed to help you do much more than memorize definitions. The CPP examination evaluates judgment, structured thinking, and the ability to make sound decisions under pressure. This is part 1 of our 5-part journey through Domain 1, Security Principles and Practices. In this session, we will establish the foundation upon which every other CPP domain is built. We will explore what security truly means, why risk drives security decisions, how modern security leaders think, and why security has evolved into a strategic business function. Let's begin by asking a fundamental question that every CPP candidate must answer correctly. What is security? Before we dive into the details, it is important to understand the roadmap for today's session. We will begin by redefining security beyond the traditional image of guards, gates, and surveillance systems. We will then examine enterprise security risk management, or ESRM, which has become one of the most influential frameworks in modern security leadership. Next, we will explore how security professionals make risk-driven decisions by understanding the relationship between threats, vulnerabilities, and consequences. We will also discuss the CPP Leadership Mindset, which emphasizes structured judgment over reactive responses, and finally examine how security creates organizational value by enabling continuity, resilience, and business success. By the end of this session, you should be able to view security through the lens of a senior security executive rather than that of an operational technician. Before mastering any CPP domain, we must establish a clear understanding of security itself. Many candidates enter the examination with a narrow definition of security focused on physical measures such as guards, locks, cameras, and fences. While these tools are important, they represent only a small portion of the security profession. Modern security is fundamentally about protecting organizational objectives from threats and disruptions. Whether those objectives involve people, information, assets, operations, or reputation, security exists to support and protect them. The CPP examination consistently approaches security from a strategic perspective. Therefore, understanding security as an organizational function rather than simply a collection of protective measures is the first step toward thinking like a CPP professional. Let's now look at how this modern view differs from traditional perceptions of security. When people hear the word security, they often imagine guards standing at entrances, access control systems, perimeter fencing, and surveillance cameras. These measures are certainly important, but they are tools, not the objective. The traditional view of security is largely reactive. It focuses on preventing incidents through visible protective measures. Modern security leadership, however, takes a broader and more strategic perspective. Today, security is about risk identification, risk reduction, business continuity, operational resilience, and proactive governance. It is integrated into organizational decision-making and supports long-term business success. A CPP professional understands that security is not simply about stopping bad things from happening. It is about enabling organizations to operate confidently and effectively in an uncertain environment. This broader perspective naturally leads us to the concept of risk management, which sits at the heart of modern security practice. One of the most important principles in the entire CPP body of knowledge is that security is fundamentally a process of managing risk. Security professionals recognize that eliminating all risk is impossible. Every organization faces uncertainty, whether from criminal activity, insider threats, cyber attacks, natural disasters, or operational failures. The role of security is therefore not to eliminate risk entirely, but to identify risks, evaluate their potential impact, and implement controls that reduce exposure to acceptable levels. This requires a structured understanding of 3 critical elements: threats, vulnerabilities, and consequences. A threat is something that could cause harm. A vulnerability is a weakness that allows that threat to succeed. A consequence is the impact if the threat is realized. When these factors interact, risk emerges. Every effective security program begins and ends with understanding risk, and every major CPP decision is ultimately a risk management decision. To make sound security decisions, a CPP professional must clearly distinguish between threats, vulnerabilities, and consequences. A threat is any event, actor, or condition capable of causing harm to organizational assets or objectives. Examples include criminals, cyber attackers, natural disasters, insider threats, or acts of terrorism. A vulnerability is a weakness in systems, processes, technology, or human behavior that allows a threat to exploit an organization. Weak access controls, poor procedures, inadequate training, or outdated systems are common examples. A consequence is the impact that occurs if the threat successfully exploits the vulnerability. Consequences may include financial losses, operational disruptions, legal liabilities, reputational damage, or harm to people. Risk exists when all three elements interact. If there is no credible threat, no significant vulnerability, or no meaningful consequence, the level of risk may be low. This relationship forms the foundation of modern security decision-making and will continue to appear throughout the CPP examination and throughout this entire mastery series. Now that we understand security as a risk-driven discipline, the next logical question is, how do organizations systematically manage these risks? The answer lies in one of the most important concepts in contemporary security leadership: Enterprise Security Risk Management, or ESRM. We now move into one of the most important concepts in modern security leadership: Enterprise Security Risk Management, or ESRM. ESRM represents a fundamental shift in how organizations view security. Rather than operating as a separate support function, security becomes a strategic business partner that helps leadership identify, assess, and manage risk. Under ESRM, security decisions are directly linked to organizational objectives. Security leaders work closely with stakeholders across the enterprise to understand what assets are most critical, what risks threaten them, and what controls are appropriate. This approach ensures that security investments support business priorities and contribute to long-term organizational resilience. At its core, ESRM is built on 4 key principles. First, it is business-focused. Security activities are evaluated based on their ability to protect organizational objectives rather than simply implementing security measures. Second, it is stakeholder-centered. Business leaders own risk, while security professionals provide expertise and manage protective controls. Third, ESRM emphasizes strategic decision-making. Resources are allocated according to risk priorities and business impact, not tradition or departmental preferences. Finally, it is risk-driven. Every security initiative should demonstrate measurable risk reduction and support organizational goals. This philosophy has become central to modern CPP thinking and appears throughout the examination. ESRM is not a one-time activity. It is a continuous cycle that adapts as risks and business conditions evolve. The process begins by identifying the organization's critical assets. Once assets are understood, security professionals identify threats, vulnerabilities, and associated risks. These risks are then prioritized according to likelihood, impact, and business importance. Appropriate controls are implemented, and their effectiveness is continuously monitored. The cycle then repeats, ensuring that security remains aligned with changing operational realities. For CPP candidates, this cycle provides a structured framework for analyzing many scenario-based questions. Frameworks become meaningful when applied to real situations. Consider a manufacturing organization where the primary asset is its production capability. A credible threat may be sabotage or unauthorized access, while a vulnerability could be weak access controls within critical production areas. If exploited, the consequence may include production downtime, financial losses, contractual penalties, and reputational damage. Using ESRM principles, security leaders would assess the risk, determine its business impact, and recommend controls proportional to the exposure. Notice that the discussion focuses on protecting business operations, not simply installing security equipment. This is the essence of ESRM thinking. A common misconception is that security exists only to prevent losses. In reality, effective security enables organizations to operate with confidence. It supports growth, innovation, expansion, and operational stability by reducing uncertainty. Organizations are more willing to pursue opportunities when they understand and manage associated risks. This is why leading security executives position themselves as business partners rather than enforcement authorities. Their role is not to stop business activity but to help organizations take calculated risks safely and responsibly. This shift in mindset is increasingly reflected in CPP examination questions. When security is aligned with business objectives, it creates measurable value across the organization. Strong security programs support continuity by reducing disruptions and improving resilience. They build confidence among employees, clients, partners, and investors. They facilitate growth by enabling organizations to enter new markets and pursue new opportunities with reduced risk. Effective security also supports compliance, helping organizations avoid legal, regulatory, and financial consequences. Perhaps most importantly, security protects reputation, one of the most valuable assets any organization possesses. Modern security leaders understand that security is not merely an operational expense. It is a strategic investment that protects and enhances organizational value. So far, we have seen how security supports business objectives through ESRM and risk-based decision-making. The next section explores another key CPP principle: understanding risk itself, how threats, vulnerabilities, and consequences interact, and how security professionals prioritize and manage exposure across the organization. For many years, organizations viewed security as a necessary expense, something required to prevent losses but incapable of generating value. That perception has changed significantly. Today, executive leaders increasingly evaluate security programs based on their contribution to organizational resilience, continuity, and risk reduction. Effective security helps prevent costly disruptions, protects reputation, and enables business growth. The modern security leader speaks the language of business. Instead of asking, "How much does security cost?" they ask, "What business risks are we reducing, and what value are we protecting?" This shift from cost center to strategic partner is a defining characteristic of contemporary security management and an important CPP concept. Having explored the business side of security, we now return to one of the most heavily tested concepts in the CPP examination. Threats, vulnerabilities, and risk form the foundation of nearly every security assessment, investigation, and decision-making process. Candidates often know the definitions individually but struggle to distinguish them in practical scenarios. That confusion frequently leads to incorrect answers. As security professionals, our objective is not merely to identify threats. We must understand how threats interact with vulnerabilities and what consequences may result if those vulnerabilities are exploited. Understanding these relationships allows us to prioritize resources and focus efforts where they will have the greatest impact. Risk does not exist independently. It emerges when a credible threat encounters a vulnerability and creates the potential for harm. Think of these concepts as a chain. The threat is the source of danger. The vulnerability is the weakness that can be exploited. Risk is the resulting possibility of loss or disruption. For example, an insider with malicious intent is a threat. Weak inventory controls are a vulnerability. The resulting risk is theft, fraud, or financial loss. In CPP scenarios, identifying which element is being described is often the first step toward selecting the correct answer. Strong security professionals learn to separate these concepts clearly before deciding on appropriate controls. Threats come in many forms, and security leaders must maintain awareness across a broad spectrum of risks. Physical threats include theft, workplace violence, vandalism, and unauthorized access. Cyber threats include ransomware, social engineering, and system intrusions. Insider threats arise from employees, contractors, or trusted individuals who intentionally or unintentionally cause harm. Organizations must also prepare for natural hazards such as floods, earthquakes, storms, and pandemics, as well as political or criminal threats including terrorism, organized crime, extortion, and civil unrest. The CPP examination frequently tests a candidate's ability to recognize multiple threat categories operating simultaneously within the same scenario. A threat alone does not automatically create significant risk. Risk becomes meaningful when vulnerabilities provide an opportunity for exploitation. Weak procedures, unclear responsibilities, and poorly enforced policies can create procedural vulnerabilities. Inadequate training may leave employees unable to recognize or respond to threats effectively. Physical vulnerabilities can include insufficient access controls, poor surveillance coverage, or inadequate protective barriers. Technology can also become a vulnerability when systems are outdated, improperly configured, or not monitored effectively. One of the primary responsibilities of a security program is to identify and reduce vulnerabilities before they are exploited. Risk assessment requires evaluating two critical factors: likelihood and impact. Risk equals likelihood times impact. Risk equals likelihood / times impact. Risk equals likelihood times impact. A high likelihood event with limited impact may require monitoring but not major investment. Conversely, a low probability event with catastrophic consequences may justify significant controls because of its potential effect on the organization. CPP professionals must balance these factors carefully when recommending security measures. The goal is not to eliminate every possible risk. The goal is to allocate resources proportionately and focus attention where the organization's exposure is greatest. This risk-based approach forms the backbone of sound security leadership and effective decision-making. Now that we understand how risk is created and assessed, the next question becomes: how do organizations protect themselves against those risks? The answer lies in one of the core principles of modern security strategy: layered security and defense in depth. No security measure is perfect. Even the most advanced technology, strongest procedures, or best-trained personnel can fail under certain circumstances. That is why effective security programs rely on multiple layers of protection rather than a single control. The concept of layered security, often called defense in depth, recognizes that threats must overcome several barriers before reaching critical assets. Each layer provides another opportunity to deter, detect, delay, or respond to an attack. For CPP professionals, layered security is a fundamental principle because it improves resilience and reduces dependence on any single safeguard. The objective is not perfection. It is creating a system that remains effective even when individual controls fail. Layered security operates through four complementary functions. The first is deterrence, which discourages threats from acting in the first place. Visible cameras, security personnel, lighting, and signage often serve this purpose. The second is detection, allowing organizations to identify threats as early as possible through alarms, surveillance systems, monitoring tools, and reporting mechanisms. The third function is delay. Physical barriers, locks, access controls, and secure construction slow an adversary's progress and create time for intervention. Finally, there is response. Trained personnel, emergency procedures, and incident management processes help contain and neutralize threats that breach earlier layers. Together, these elements create a robust and resilient security posture. Security responsibilities extend far beyond protecting facilities and assets. Organizations have a legal and ethical obligation to take reasonable steps to protect the people who work for them and interact with them. This obligation is known as duty of care. Duty of care applies to employees, contractors, visitors, customers, and other stakeholders who may be affected by organizational activities. Modern organizations are expected to anticipate foreseeable risks and implement reasonable measures to reduce harm. For security professionals, duty of care is not simply a compliance requirement. It is a fundamental responsibility that directly affects organizational reputation, liability, and trust. Duty of care requires organizations to take reasonable and proportionate actions to protect individuals from foreseeable harm. This responsibility extends across a wide range of situations, including workplace safety, facility security, travel security, and emergency preparedness. The key word is reasonable. Organizations are not expected to eliminate every possible risk, but they are expected to identify threats, implement appropriate safeguards, establish emergency procedures, and document their efforts. Failure to meet these obligations can result in legal liability, regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of stakeholder confidence. The CPP examination frequently evaluates a candidate's ability to recognize when duty of care considerations should influence security decisions. One of the most common applications of duty of care involves employee travel. When an organization sends personnel to higher-risk locations, its responsibilities do not end when the employee leaves the office. Security professionals may need to provide threat intelligence, destination-specific risk assessments, travel guidance, emergency contacts, and ongoing monitoring throughout the trip. In addition, organizations should have plans for emergency evacuation, crisis communication, medical assistance, and incident response. This example highlights an important CPP principle. Duty of care follows the employee, not merely the workplace. Security leaders must therefore think beyond facilities and consider risks wherever organizational personnel operate. For security programs to function effectively, they require clear governance structures and defined accountability. Governance establishes oversight, authority, direction, and strategic alignment. It ensures that security objectives support broader organizational goals and receive appropriate executive attention. Accountability clarifies who is responsible for decisions, actions, and outcomes. Without clearly assigned responsibilities, security efforts can become inconsistent, fragmented, and difficult to measure. Strong governance also promotes transparency, compliance, and continuous improvement. One important CPP principle is that security professionals manage security programs and controls, but business leaders ultimately own organizational risk. Understanding this distinction is critical for both the examination and real-world security leadership. We have now examined how organizations protect people through duty of care and how governance provides structure and accountability. The next section focuses on another essential foundation of security programs: policies, procedures, and the integration of security functions across the enterprise. Governance provides the structure that allows a security program to operate effectively and consistently across the organization. It establishes oversight, accountability, compliance, and strategic direction. Without governance, security decisions become fragmented, inconsistent, and often disconnected from business priorities. Executive leadership plays a critical role by ensuring that significant security risks receive appropriate attention and resources. Governance also creates consistency by ensuring that policies and standards are applied uniformly across locations and departments. Ultimately, strong governance helps organizations make informed security decisions while maintaining compliance with legal, regulatory, and contractual obligations. This is one of the most frequently tested concepts in the CPP examination. Many candidates assume that because security professionals assess and manage risks, they also own them. In reality, risk ownership belongs to the business. Business leaders, department heads, and executives are responsible for accepting, transferring, mitigating, or avoiding risks that affect their operations. The security function provides expertise, conducts assessments, recommends controls, and monitors effectiveness. However, security does not own the business risk itself. When a CPP examination question asks who is ultimately responsible for accepting risk, the answer is typically the business owner or executive responsible for the affected operation. Understanding this distinction is essential for both examination success and professional practice. Every effective security program relies on policies and procedures. They provide the framework that translates strategic objectives into daily operational activities. Policies establish direction and expectations. Procedures provide detailed instructions for implementing those expectations consistently and effectively. Together, they ensure that security activities are standardized, defensible, and aligned with organizational objectives. Without clear policies and procedures, organizations face increased operational risk, inconsistent decision-making, and greater difficulty demonstrating compliance. For CPP professionals, understanding the relationship between policies and procedures is a foundational competency. Although the terms are often used together, policies and procedures serve different purposes. A policy states what must be done. It provides high-level direction and reflects management's intentions and expectations. Policies are generally mandatory and authoritative. A procedure explains how a policy is implemented. It provides the detailed steps, responsibilities, and actions required to achieve compliance. For example, a policy may require employees to display identification badges at all times. The procedure would explain how badges are issued, displayed, replaced, and verified. In CPP scenario questions, recognizing whether an issue requires a policy decision or a procedural solution can often lead directly to the correct answer. Strong policies provide much more than administrative guidance. They create consistency by ensuring that similar situations are handled according to the same standards across the organization. Policies establish accountability by clearly defining responsibilities and expected behaviors. They also support legal defensibility by demonstrating due diligence and reasonable organizational practices. In addition, policies assist with compliance by translating legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements into practical operational expectations. When incidents occur, well-designed policies help organizations demonstrate that appropriate controls, expectations, and oversight mechanisms were in place. For these reasons, policies remain one of the most important tools available to security leaders. Modern threats rarely fit neatly into a single security discipline. A cyber intrusion may involve insider actions. A physical breach may expose sensitive information. Personnel issues can quickly evolve into operational or reputational crises. As a result, organizations increasingly adopt an integrated security approach that combines physical security, information security, and personnel security into a coordinated system. Rather than operating independently, these functions share information, align objectives, and support common organizational goals. This integrated approach improves situational awareness, strengthens resilience, and enables more effective risk management. For CPP professionals, integrated security reflects the reality of today's threat environment and represents a key element of modern security leadership. We are now approaching the final section of this presentation. Having explored security principles, ESRM, risk management, layered protection, duty of care, governance, and integrated security, we will conclude by examining the CPP Leadership Mindset, the way successful security leaders think, prioritize, and make decisions under pressure. Integrated security is built upon three interconnected pillars: physical security, information security, and personnel security. Physical security protects people, facilities, and assets through measures such as access control, surveillance, barriers, and response capabilities. Information security protects organizational data and systems from unauthorized access, manipulation, disclosure, or destruction. Personnel security focuses on the human element. It includes hiring practices, background screening, access management, behavioral awareness, and cultivating a security-conscious culture. While each pillar has a distinct purpose, they are most effective when working together. Modern threats often cross these boundaries, making integration essential for effective risk management. A disgruntled employee is a classic example of why integrated security is necessary. From a personnel security perspective, warning signs may include behavioral changes, policy violations, declining performance, or indicators of elevated insider risk. From an information security perspective, unusual system activity, unauthorized access attempts, excessive data downloads, or suspicious account behavior may require investigation. From a physical security perspective, access credentials, visitor logs, facility entry records, and surveillance footage may reveal additional indicators of concern. No single function possesses the entire picture. By sharing information and coordinating responses, organizations can identify risks earlier and prevent isolated issues from escalating into serious incidents. Throughout this presentation, we have discussed principles, frameworks, and security concepts. However, the CPP examination is ultimately designed to test something deeper than knowledge alone. It evaluates whether you can think like a security leader. Security leaders operate in environments characterized by uncertainty, competing priorities, incomplete information, and constant change. Their success depends on disciplined judgment rather than instinctive reactions. The CPP mindset emphasizes structured thinking, balanced decision-making, risk awareness, and alignment with organizational objectives. This mindset is what separates strategic security professionals from technical specialists. CPP professionals approach situations methodically and objectively. First, they assess before acting. Rather than rushing to conclusions, they gather information, understand context, and identify the full scope of the problem. Second, they prioritize life safety. When competing priorities exist, protection of human life remains the highest consideration. Third, they support business continuity. Security decisions should reduce disruption while enabling legitimate operations whenever possible. Finally, they follow structured processes. Decisions are based on established principles, risk assessments, and organizational objectives rather than emotion or personal bias. This disciplined approach appears repeatedly throughout CPP examination scenarios. One of the biggest mistakes CPP candidates make is focusing exclusively on memorization. Memorization may help recall definitions, but it does not prepare candidates for complex scenario-based questions. The examination rewards reasoning, judgment, and the ability to apply principles to unfamiliar situations. Candidates who rely solely on memorized facts often choose answers that seem technically correct but fail to consider business impact, proportionality, stakeholder interests, or operational realities. Successful CPP professionals think like leaders. They analyze context, evaluate options, select proportional responses, and align decisions with organizational objectives. The goal is not simply to know security concepts, it is to apply them effectively. As we conclude Part 1 of Domain 1, several key principles should remain clear. Security is fundamentally about managing risk in support of organizational objectives. ESRM positions security as a strategic partner that helps leadership identify and manage risk across the enterprise. Effective security enables continuity, growth, compliance, and resilience rather than merely preventing incidents. Layered protection improves resilience by creating multiple opportunities to deter, detect, delay, and respond to threats. Business leaders own organizational risk, while security professionals provide expertise, controls, and guidance. Most importantly, CPP professionals think systematically. They assess before acting, prioritize life safety, support business continuity, and apply structured decision-making under pressure. These concepts form the foundation for every other CPP domain and will appear repeatedly throughout the remainder of this Mastery series. That brings us to the end of Part 1 of 5 for Domain 1, Security Principles and Practices. In this session, we establish the foundation of modern security leadership by exploring ESRM, risk management, layered protection, duty of care, governance, policies, integrated security, and the CPP Leadership Mindset. In the next video, we will move from concepts to application as we begin solving moderate-level CPP scenario questions, learning how these principles are used in real-world decision-making and examination situations. Thank you for joining the ASIS CPP Mastery Series 2026. If you found this session valuable, please like, subscribe, and share it with fellow security professionals pursuing CPP certification. Remember, CPP success is not built on memorization alone. It is built on disciplined judgment, structured risk assessment, and the ability to make calm operational decisions under pressure.